Aha, bojo. Mashigan is nikas, manganian do them. Kichimenje kamek a long time ago. The people, they came together for that ceremony of ceremonies, that dance of life, the Sundance we call it today. And in that ceremony, the men, they had a responsibility. And in that ceremony, the women, they too had a responsibility. The men's responsibility was to go into the forest, to go and get that mitiganabe, that tree of life that they would erect at the center of that ceremony. Their responsibility also was to go and get those trees that they would use to build that lodge where they would have that ceremony. The women's responsibility was to go into the forest and go and peel the bark that they would use to tie that lodge together. Their responsibility also was to prepare the feast food that they would all share as part of that ceremony. So sure enough, as the men went off to go and get that mitiganabe, those little boys, they came and followed the men. The men turned to those little boys and asked, "What are you doing, little boys?" And the little boys replied, "We're coming to help you." "No, no, no," said the men. "You're going to be in the way. You go back to the camp and play over there." And they shooed them away. As the women too were getting prepared, those little girls, they came following the women. And again those women turned to those little girls and asked, "What are you doing here, little girls?" And they said, "We're coming to help you." "No, no, no," they said. "We have lots to do, very little time. You're going to be in the way. Go play at the camp." And they shooed them back. Sure enough, those men, they brought out that mitiganabe and they dressed it up and they erected it in the center of where they were going to build that lodge. They built that lodge, tying it together with the bark that the women had brought. A big feast was prepared just outside that lodge, and all those women gathered on one side and all the men on the other. And they were just about ready to have that last feast before that ceremony began when those little children came squeezing in between the adults. But once again, somebody turned to those children and said, "This food, this water, that's for the dancers. Don't you realize that they're going to give up this food, this water, so that you can have life? You children, you wait for a little while longer." And they shooed them away. Sure enough, after everyone had their fill, all those women came filing into the lodge, all the men on the other side. That big drum was at the other end, with some men sitting around it. They were just about ready to start that ceremony when all the little girls come filing in, all the little boys on the other side. But once again, somebody turned to those children and said, "You children, this is a very sacred ceremony. This is no place for you to be running around, fooling around, making noise. You go and do that at the camp." And again they shooed them away. Sure enough, that big drum started, and all those women on their side, the men on the other side, with their eagle whistles, they started to dance and pray to that tree of life. Finally, on the fourth day, as that ceremony came to an end, a big feast was prepared outside that lodge once again. And all those women, they came filing out and gathered around the food. All the men, they too began to file out and gathered around the food. They were just about ready to start that celebration when somebody looked around and said, "Where's the children? We can't have the celebration without them. They must be at the camp." So sure enough, somebody ran to the camp, and soon enough they returned and said that there was no children at the camp. So of course this alarmed the adults. "Well, we can't have the celebration without them. We need to find them." So they began to search, some in the forest, some in the fields. This man, he came to this hill, and as he started to climb that hill, he could hear a faint drum, the beating of the drum. And as he climbed, the louder it became. Finally he got to the top of that hill, and just on the other side of that hill, was this small little Metigonabe, this small little lodge, this little drum with some little boys sitting there, these little girls on one side, little boys on the other side, with their little eagle whistles. And that's the way that story is told. We take different meaning from that story. And one of the most common meanings is that we need to involve our children. But one of the other ways I take that story also is, aren't we all Creator's children? And if so, then all of this belongs to all of us. And that's why I believe, as Aboriginal people, we share what's under Mother Earth. We share what's above Mother Earth. We share our medicines, our teachings, our songs, because we know that they don't just belong to us. Now, the only problem with sharing is that sometimes somebody will come along and they'll twist that up. And that's why from time to time we'll go into our cities, we'll go into a store, and sometimes we'll see sweetgrass, $7.95. Sage, half price today, $4.50. What did it cost those people? A little bit of tobacco to pick those medicines. But they make money off of it today. I'm not sure if you heard, but probably about 5-6 years ago now, this man in the United States, he must have went to a ceremony somewhere and he figured it out in his head that he could make some money off of that. So what did he do? He built this big sweat lodge. And into that sweat lodge, he put about 60 people. And he charged them $10,000 for that week-long experience. But in that sweat, 3 people ended up dying. And when we hear those things, it's very unfortunate. And sometimes it hurts as well, that people get hurt in that way. But regardless, we share, because we know that all this doesn't just belong to us, that it belongs to all of us. Aha, Mirach.